Dick Cavett Show. Tonight, Dick's guests are Marlon Brando, Lummi Indian Tribal Chairman Sam Kagi, Project Director for the Lummi Tribe, Dr. Wallace Heath, from the Northern Cheyenne Tribal Council, Dennis Limberhand, Chairman of the Pyramid Paiute Tribe, Mervyn Wright. Ladies and gentlemen, Dick Cavett.
Don't eat. You'll go too far and then hate yourself in the morning. Very nice to see you. Say, there was a slight typographical error about tonight's show. My guest is Marlon Perkins of Zoo Parade, but I know that no one will. No, I'm kidding, I hope. What was the other thing I just want to mention, because I don't want to waste any time right now. Just a brief quiz. See if anyone knows. In what context was the line said, "I could have been a contender"? Does anyone? What? On the waterfront? No, it was Senator Muskie commenting on the Watergate hearing. As you can see, I don't want to waste any time out here, even though I already had. My guest tonight, special guest, is Marlon Brando. And with him tonight are some other gentlemen who are from the Lummi Indian Tribal Council, Sam Kagi, Project Director for the Lummi Tribe, Dr. Wallace Heath, from the Northern Cheyenne Tribal Council, Dennis Limberhand, and Chairman of the Paiute, and that's the Pyramid Paiute Tribe, Mervyn Wright. To save time, take a pause, we'll take a message, we'll be right back. My guest flew all the way from Tahiti to be here tonight, which sets some kind of record, I think. I'm very honored to have him here. You have caught glimpses of him in the past as Stanley Kowalski in Streetcar Named Desire, Zapata in Viva Zapata, Mark Antony in Julius Caesar, Terry Malloy in On the Waterfront, Vito Corleone in The Godfather, and Paul in Last Tango in Paris. He despises superlatives. He's often been called the best actor in America or in the world, but I want to downplay that tonight because I want him to be happy. Will you welcome, please, Mr. Marlon Brando. I guess, how are you would be as good as anything.
I'm kind of weary.
Are you wiped out from the jet trip?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. I appreciate the amount of miles you have been covering to get here, and you were delayed, and it was a ghastly story, but it's nice of you to come and put up with it all. I'm so self-conscious. I don't know what to do, because we spoke on the phone for over 6 hours, and a lot of it was about what neither of us can stand about this kind of program. To the point where now I don't know how to avoid all that stuff. Will you help me as we move along?
Well, I think that we, I had a special treat because you allowed me to come into your life, and Dick describes his background as a young boy in Nebraska, which I think would be worth telling for about 20 minutes. You mind if I go into all that?
I'd love it. I've suddenly forgotten it all.
Yeah.
Anyway, have you seen any good movies lately?
Super Rich Shadow?
Oh, that's supposed to be in my dressing room. Oh. No, that's part of the, that's merely part of the commercial. Where was I? Do you go to the movies? Come to think of it.
Once in a while.
Yeah. I'll tell you what happened. We talked on the phone, and at one point in the conversation, you reeled off about 7 or 8 things that you had observed about me watching the show, about how I sometimes don't like people and pretend that I do, and vice versa, and about a dozen more. And they were so uncanny and on the nose that I decided I could never work again. And now I feel it. Would you like a glass of water?
A bug just flew out of my glass.
I know it. I'm terribly embarrassed. As he started to pour the water, a bug flew out. Probably a critic. Anyway. Let me ask you an obligatory question, and we can get that out of the way right now. And if at any time I get into things that you don't want to talk about, give me a signal, puff out your cheeks.
Throw the picture at you.
That'd be fine. If you had the Academy Awards night to do over again, would you do any of that differently?
Well, I don't think so, no. I felt that that there was an opportunity for, since the American Indian hasn't been able to hear his voice heard, or have his voice heard, anywhere in the history of the United States, I felt that it was a marvelous opportunity for an Indian to be able to voice his opinion to 85 million people. I guess that was the number. And I felt that he had a right to, in view of what Hollywood has done to him. And I was embarrassed for Shashin. She wasn't able to say what she intended to say. And I was distressed that people should have booed and whistled and stomped, even though perhaps it was directed at myself. They should have at least had the courtesy to listen to her. But I think she did very well, and I was very glad that she did have what opportunity she had to say what she did. And
why didn't you get to read your entire statement as you planned it?
Well, I think that they felt that it was inappropriate, and I actually don't know. I think they didn't want her there. They didn't want the evening interrupted with that particular note. And from their insular point of view, I felt that perhaps they had a point. But I don't think that people generally realize what the motion picture industry has done to the American Indian. As a matter of fact, all ethnic groups, all minorities, all non-whites. And people just simply don't realize. They just took it for granted that that's the way people are going to be presented, and these cliches were just going to be perpetuated. And so when someone makes a protest of some kind and says, no, please don't present the Chinese this way, or please, I mean, on this network every night, well, perhaps not every night, but you can see silly renditions of human behavior. The leering Filipino houseboy, the wily Japanese, or the kook or the gook, and the idiot black man, and the stupid Indian, and it just goes on and on and on. And people actually don't realize how deeply these people are injured by seeing themselves represented, not so much the adults because they're already inured to that kind of pain and pressure, but children, Indian children, seeing Indians represented as savage, as ugly, as nasty, vicious, treacherous, drunken. They grow up only with a negative image of themselves, and it lasts a lifetime. Is that an answer to your question?
Yeah. Did you expect the kind of outrage that you got from people? I believe, well, that very night, Raquel Welch made a joke against you, saying that I hope the next person doesn't have a cause. Who's the Indian? Who's the Western star who followed later? Steve McQueen. Clint Eastwood, yes, of course. I very seldom make mistakes. He did his version of a joke, and then John Wayne looked like he was about ready to get a posse together. He looked so sore. Did that surprise you, that they would be angered that you desecrated their cathedral?
I wasn't surprised, no. There were a number of people that felt that Sachin had not been welcomed and not been treated properly, and people that were sympathetic to what she was trying to say. And I received an awful lot of mail in support of that.
The booing made me sore.
Well, actually, I think the people were booing at me. They were booing because they thought, well, this moment is sacrosanct, and you're ruining our fantasy with the intrusion of a little reality. And I suppose it was perhaps unkind of me to do that, but there was a larger issue, and it's an issue that nobody in the motion picture industry has ever addressed themselves to, unless forced to. I mean, the blacks have brought about changes because they were just damn angry about it. And they thumped the tub and threatened and made some noise about it. But if they had just been silent and thought, well, gradually wisdom will come to those who are in the business of the movies, and they will do right by us, and today would never have come. We, have a lot to be grateful for that the blacks were as insistent as they were that the image of blacks were changing, but it's a block by block fight. It's people are very timorous now about showing blacks in an unkindly light, but they would go on with the Filipino houseboy or the Indian. I mean, you see it every day on television. Not every day.
There's a World War II movie in which, actually it's John Wayne again, I don't mean to pick on him, in which he refers to Mr. Tojo's little yellow-bellied rats. And there was so much racism in World War II movies. You see, it's really, really surprising. I mean, it was so crude that it's worse than you remember it. The thing that bugged me, too, was that people said, there's Brando jumping on a social cause bandwagon now, getting in on the Indians, forgetting that in the 50s you were, I think, one of the first people fishing with the Puyallup Indians up on the West Coast. You must forgive me. We must take a message, and we'll be right back. Stay where you are. How much of what's been written about you can be trusted? There are a couple of books. There's...
Well, I've noticed that you always say, you look at your notes and you say to the interviewee.
Yes.
It was once, someone said about you once that this and that and the other thing, and it's, I always wondered why you did that.
Looked at them or said it?
Yeah, said it.
Well, if I look at them and say nothing, the show becomes so quiet that nobody can actually hear. You mean,
but I mean, I think that the press is a very poor reference for knowing somebody. I don't think that you I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah. Well, there are 2 books in print purporting to tell the story of your life, your rages, your excesses, your lusts, your dreams. I think that I'm almost quoting from the cover of one of them. Can we trust those? And if not, how do they get away with it?
I don't think it's worth going into. I mean,
On their part or mine?
No, well, news, of course, is big business, and there are news items that are worth $100. There are some that are worth several $1,000s. Some news items are worth $100,000, and some are $2 items. But news is business, and people sell news. And unfortunately, people in my position, people in the public eye, are sellable commodities, but they're not any different than Kleenex or Dial soap or anything else. And so if we, find something out that's about your sex life or something that you do with your fingernails after you cut them off,
Who told you, man?
If you smoke the grime from your navel, then that's big news. That's important. Geez, Dick Cavett smokes the grime from his navel and he saves his fingernail parings.
I'd rather you hadn't mentioned that about me. I revealed that to you in private, and I thought I could trust you.
But anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because finally, and I've found that people really don't believe all the nonsense they read. And they look at you when they meet you and wonder if it's true. Mm-hmm. But they finally make a decision on what their experience with you personally is. If it's for 5 minutes, or, if you say thank you to the hostess and she brings you a cup of coffee, well, then she thinks you're a courteous person. If you're tired and cranky and you're ill or something and you don't want to be disturbed or sign autographs and things like that, then they say, well, he's a kind of a funny person. But,
so whether or not you threw horse manure out of the top window of your old place on 52nd Street when you were young and yelled, watch out for the flying red horse, which is I'm just picking one at random that they always seem to write about you, is irrelevant. When people are watching you on the screen, I don't know whether they wonder if those things... But I always wonder, if those aren't true, then where do they come from?
Well, but I think you...
And did you?
I think that that's a kind of a question that... Well, there's a perfect example.
Yeah.
On your show, you have money items as well. You have items that you sell to the audience and items that were entertaining or they offer some sort of sparkling interlude for what otherwise might be a sea of dullness.
Of dullness?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a guest that's very boring and you ask them some question like that, well, I'm getting far afield. I think that you have to think about your ratings when you're giving the show, when you're doing the show. And you have to make the show as interesting as possible. And to the question of whether or not I throw manure out of, what was it?
Fourth-story window of a house on 52nd Street.
If I throw manure out of some window, it's sort of provocative, and people would rather listen to that than listen to the fact that yesterday the Supreme Court refused to hear the Pyramid Lake water right issue. I mean, that's part of the sea of dullness.
Yeah.
People don't want to hear that. They want to know. They want to hear me describe how I might have put the.
I can only tell you that I was on 52nd Street the other day, and they haven't cleaned it up yet, so it probably is true. But why people are more interested in that, I don't know. I was hoping we could find that out. I'm not going to quote anything else out of the press. Is there anything else you'd want to say about the Academy Award night, or shall we close? Can we close on that? There was some talk that you were going to go to Wounded Knee, and I was wondering what changed your mind about that.
Well, I wanted to digress just for a second there. I have a great deal of sympathy for the fact that you try to put on shows that deal with serious issues. And there's a terrible conflict that you must have trying to make the show entertaining. You have to do that in order to keep that segment of the audience who's not particularly interested in the issues tuned into the station. And I think you do a yeoman's job. There's nobody else on television that does what you do. Very often you're forced to make concessions. I mean, asking me questions about whether I threw horse manure on somebody, you know, that seems ridiculous on the face of it. But then it has a part, you know, that if you don't ask those questions, you don't have that kind of conversation. There are a lot of guys in their undershirts drinking beer just going to turn the station over to some other channel.
My God, what are they talking about?
Yeah. Nobody wants to hear about malnutrition among Indians. Nobody wants to hear about the fact that the Indians have the highest suicide rate of any group in the United States. That's dull stuff. People come home, they've got enough trouble, and they don't want to listen to it. They want to listen to the fripperies and the foolishness and the fun and the giggles and all that. So I think that you really deserve full credit for being able to wend your way through the broadcasting shows. And but I think that, as a matter of fact, you've touched an awful lot of people, and they've responded when they wanted to take you off the air for whatever reason it was. The hue and cry went up, and people did support you in full, and I was very glad for that, and I think everyone, finally, even those beer drinkers, will be benefited by it.
I got a lot of beer drinkers watching. Thank you. I'm humiliated when I'm complimented, and I must move on quickly. Did you dream that Last Tango would be such a bombshell in every way, that it would explode all over the place in the way that it did, or did you think it would just be accepted as another movie?
Well, I didn't know. No, those are just rolls of the dice, and you never know. I didn't know.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, I interrupted you or something on the subject of you were going to go to Wounded Knee and then decided not to, and it was never made.
I interrupted you.
You're right again.
Wounded Knee was surrounded by federal officers, marshals, state police, deputized ranchers, anybody who wanted to hold a gun and make himself feel good. Also, there were Indians, local Indians, that represented the administration view, who were opposed to AIM. And all that was needed to make it a flop was for me to go to Wounded Knee, be arrested by a vigilante group, or stopped by U.S. Marshals or something, and turned over to deputized conservative Indians. So then the headlines would be Indians repulse Brando Wounded Knee, which was perhaps be the thing that the government would be looking for. And I tried to get into Wounded Knee, and but I wasn't able to. I went to Denver and set up I was going to meet somebody there, and they had trouble getting out Wounded Knee to meet me there, and it didn't work out.
Well, now it lapse back again. I'm fascinated with the furor over Last Tango. I wonder if anybody's able to see that movie for what it is, because of the fact that before it came out, a review appeared that said it was one of the greatest artistic events since Stravinsky's debut of Sacre de Printemps, on Pauline Kael's review. Have you found that anybody's able to watch the movie and see it for what it is, or do they know much too much about it beforehand?
Well, I haven't seen the movie, and I really don't think that I can. I don't know what I could say about it that might be useful or amusing or interesting.
Then we'll get off of that. Why do you downgrade acting as a profession?
What?
I say, why do you downgrade acting as a profession over the years?
What makes you think I do?
Well, I've read it in the press. Saw it in black and white. I can't believe the press. I don't know what we can believe in this country. You know what I mean. Though you've said over the years, well, it's not a fit profession for a man.
In an effort to help your ratings.
Don't worry about it.
I'll maybe say something. I think that we couldn't survive a second if we weren't able to act. That acting is a survival mechanism, and it's a social unguent, and it's a lubricant. And we act to save our lives, actually, every day. People lie constantly, every day, by not saying something that they think, or saying something that they don't think, or showing something that they don't feel, or trying to give the appearance of feeling something that they don't actually. I said that, didn't I?
Yeah, but that's not acting.
That is acting. That is
no, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
But you know what I mean.
When you're frightened, or when you're
know,
nervous,
huh?
When you're frightened and nervous in this chair, you're distressed or uncomfortable, or you're very angry.
Yeah.
And you know that that is not what is necessary to well, what cannot be shown here. You control your face. You're a highly controlled person. And
really?
And you have to do that.
I see. But you know what I mean is, we got into this on the phone. You say that that's acting. That's not. I'm motivated at that moment to do that, and I can do it. And suppose there's a guy here that I think is a schmuck, is a bore, and you invite frankness, and I can act like he's interested for a time. I'm motivated by that. But if you wake me up at 9 or 8 the following morning and say, do that same performance before a camera, and then do it again and again, I can't. Some people can. Some people do it wonderfully, and you seem to do it better than almost anybody. And so there've got to be gradations. I won't hear of the fact that what you do is no more than what I do.
Well, that isn't true. If you're working for an ad agency, some product, and you hate the guy that, the idea man, the boss, and you know that every time he comes in with some impossible notion, something that really makes you gag when you drive home on the freeway, you know damn well that you're not going to get a raise, or you're not going to get it shifted out of the position that you're in if you don't say, Leonard, I think that's terrific.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful. And you even lean forward, put your elbows on to show enthusiasm, and you get a face for it, and you do it day after day after day in order to survive in your job.
But if you had to do the line, Leonard, I think that's terrific 6 times, and get something deeper and better into it time after time, that takes an actor.
What did you say?
I said, those are one-time things where you have an immediate motivation.
No, they're not one-time things, because it's a daily procedure.
Yeah, but the dialogue changes all the time. But you're able to
The dialogue changes, but the motivation doesn't.
Are you saying that I could play any role you can play as well as you can?
Well, that might not be true, but I don't think that I could play some roles as well as you could play them. I don't think I could play the role that you're playing now.
But this is me. I'm letting it all hang out.
No, it's not you.
It isn't. This ain't me.
I mean, I think that you, I mean, you're thinking of 60 things at once. How is it going? Is it getting dull? Is he upset and distressed and inarticulate? Is he bored? Is he offended? Yeah, here's a good time for a joke. We haven't got much time. You're thinking about 9 million things and reacting to what I say, and how's that going to be? Is that going to be offensive? No, that's good. So you're doing this editing at an insane rate. And I mean, and you have to do that, and that's your job. And you have this demeanor of levity and lightness and amusement and zest, and it's easy to ascertain that finally isn't what goes on in your mind or your feelings at all.
I just feel like all my clothes have been taken off.
No, but that's something that I couldn't do. I couldn't do what you do. And that's a different kind of acting. You're playing a different kind of role. But anyway, we've done enough. We've made enough concessions to. What are you doing there?
Oh, nothing. I just have a commercial to do. And you say you couldn't do it. Let's see if you're any good at it. All you do is look up and read off the. Any way you want. As they say in commercialdom, have fun with it.
No, I won't do it.
I'm glad you didn't. What do you mean, aw? The man's incorruptible, and that's what I hoped. How long since you tried a new shade of eyeshadow? There are 25 beautiful colors. Super Rich Shadow by Revlon. Oh, I'm good. It made me even more self-conscious now. I feel like a kid who's, look, what is it?
Stevie Wonder gave me this in the airplane today, and it was very nice. He took it off his wrist and said, "I want you to have this." And it was very, very nice of him, very kind of him.
Let me ask you something. Or several. I was going to say I feel like a kid in a candy store because we can only take about 2 pieces out of all the things I want to talk to you and ask you about. I'm interested in so damn many things about you. Were you happy with the way The Godfather came out?
I'd rather not talk about movies. I don't think they're...
That's all right. Okay.
If we could figure out some way...
Did you like the book, The Godfather?
Well, we have so little time to talk about Indians,
Okay.
and there's so much to say about them that I think to talk about movies and stuff like that is such a misuse of time. But then I'm your guest, and I don't want to horn in on what your program's going to be about.
I wouldn't want you to. Okay, I'll talk about something. It bugs me that you, over the years, have acted so little. And it seems like there must be about 14 great plays and great films that you ought to do and ought to make. And I worry that this feeling that that acting is not a noble profession for a man maybe is what's kept you from it. I can now move on to something else if you like, but does that observation bug you at all?
No.
Is it none of my business? Are there roles you wish you'd played? Do you crave acting?
No. It's been a good living.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were in the lumber business and you went on the Dick Cavett show and somebody said, "Well, how do you like the lumber business, Ralph?" It is a business. It's no more than that. And those who pretend that it's an art, I think, are misguided. And acting is a craft, and it's a profession not unlike being an electrician, plumbing, or an economist. the way of getting on and providing food and shelter for yourself and family.
May I ask you one thing here? You've referred a couple times to things you did to make up for certain things you had done in the past. This is an interview with Truman Capote. And you referred to the Wild One as one of the things you want to make up for.
We're back at Space One. And I don't think that it's useful to refer to, you know, confirm or deny anything that was written in the press. It's mostly money-oriented, and therefore I don't think it has any value.
Okay. Tell me then, when, way back in the 50s, when you got interested in, when you were interested in the Indians' fishing rights, before it was fashionable to be so, what triggered that?
I read a book called Indians of the Americas, and I, after reading the book, realized that I knew nothing about the American Indian, and that everything that we are taught about the American Indian is wrong. It's inaccurate. And our school books are hopelessly lacking, perhaps criminally lacking, in revealing what our relationship was with the Indian. When we hear, as we've heard throughout all our lives, no matter how old we are, that we are a country that stands for freedom, for rightness, for justice, for everyone, it simply doesn't apply to those who are not white. It just simply doesn't apply. And we were the most rapacious, aggressive, destructive, torturing, monstrous people who swept from one coast to the other, murdering and causing mayhem among the Indians. There's one Indian in the... But that isn't revealed, because we don't like that image of ourselves. We don't like to see us. We like to see ourselves as perhaps John Wayne sees us. And and also what we've learned about the Indians has been largely taught to us by Hollywood and by motion pictures. They have educated us. So we naturally believe that when the Indians came, that the wagon circled and the Indians rode around and subjected themselves to terrible fire and died at a ratio of 65 to 1.
Both barrels of a shotgun would always get 2 Indians.
Yeah, and that wasn't the way it was at all. But anyway, Indians have been tragically misrepresented in films and in our history books, in our attitudes, in our reporting. And so we must set about to re-educate ourselves. What were you looking at?
You.
Oh.
Oh, no, there's a message coming, but...
Oh, okay.
No,
Huh?
one thing I wanted to get into on that, too, was the subject of not only how the Indians treated on the screen, but off the screen. I know a guy who was in it.
Let me tell you another thing. At a time when we say, especially, that we are going to keep our treaties, and that we do keep our word, and that we, above all people, do keep our word, I think it's important to mention that there have been nearly 400 treaties written by the United States in good faith with the Indians, and every single one of them was abrogated. Means broken or changed or altered.
No exceptions. And the Indians howl when, with laughter, I guess, when they hear a public figure like a president saying other nations will laugh at us if we don't honor our treaty commitments.
Oh, yeah.
When they can think of 400 and, I don't know what the exact figure is, 31 examples of how we haven't in the past, and this would only be the 432nd case of it if we didn't. But I do go on. We have a message. We'll be right back. I remember some years ago I read a piece by James Wexler, I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was. And he said that I don't think there's anybody who's as concerned, or a few people that I've met care so much about the quest for human dignity, something like this that we're involved in right now. That was referring to the civil rights movement. Did you ever meet Rosa Parks, or something, the name of the lady who...
No, I never did.
Who refused to give her seat to a white man on a bus in, was it Atlanta? And it kind of kicked off the whole bus protest.
Birmingham.
Was it in Birmingham that it happened? Yeah. And I remember seeing you then in Washington. And have you found that anything effective comes from these things?
Well, I think they say that it's the squeaky hinge that gets the grease, and the blacks would still be shuffling around picking peanuts and dying and starving. Of course, they haven't been all that much improved. If they hadn't made that noise, if they hadn't made that racket, somewhere there's some person out there that tells us, just be quiet, be calm, everything will right itself, and everybody will get their just desserts, but it never happens.
It'll all come out right.
It never happens. People, if they just sit back and wait for white America to do something on their behalf, to recognize their rights as a people, to recognize the sovereign rights of, well, say Indians, as a separate people, as a separate political, cultural entity within the confines of the United States, nothing's going to happen. The Indians have to shuffle. And
we will meet some in a moment. We have a message from our local stations. We should take it right now. Be right back. Sorry. We've just been joined by 4 gentlemen. Let me introduce them to you. Mervyn Wright, who is Pyramid Lake Paiute councilman from Nevada, on my far right. Dennis Limberhand, Northern Cheyenne councilman from Wyoming. Dr. Wally Heath, project director for the Lummi tribe. And Sam Kagi, over here, who is councilman of the Lummies. The situation in a lot of Indian... The crux of this is that Indian land is being threatened all over the U.S. Outside industries try to come in and set up shop on reservations. They would pollute the air and water, always, it seems, to say nothing of wrecking the land. And strip mining is one of the greatest of these threats. The Lummies have somehow avoided this fate, although it almost happened to them. The Northern Cheyennes and the Paiutes are threatened with it right now. And we have a film which spells this out pretty clearly. We'll get into that shortly. Let me ask Sam first. How did the Lummies manage to avoid this disaster?
I think just the fact that the industries that wanted to come in, take mining, not so much coal, but magnesium oxide, and the promises that they would be a sort of a heaven-sent savior to the Lummi people. With a little research, we found out there were a polluting industry, and their byproducts were not at all usable in any way, shape, or form. And I think what the Lummi people were looking for when we started was something that would be compatible to our own culture. And we found this in the fish farming idea that sprung up out of nowhere and developed to what we have today.
It's an incredible thing. I don't know how many know the word aquaculture, but what the Lummies do now is farm the sea, in effect. They build a sensational dike that one engineer told them would not work, and you, at the very lowest tide, managed to build this thing and have a booming business going in farming the sea, the way the ancient Hawaiians used to do, I guess. And we have a film that shows this project that you're talking about. Can you tell us about that? Do we roll that? And Dr. Heath, right? Will you tell us what we're going to look for in the film, what we're going to see? We narrate it as we roll it.
I think the theme really is that this was probably the first time in American history that government agencies, namely Office of Economic Opportunity and Economic Development Administration, gave money directly to a tribe in large amounts, on the order of $2 million, really sticking their necks out. And a few key administrators, like Secretary Podesta and Jim Wilson and OEO, allowed the tribe to build a very expensive dike with a lot of risk and said, okay, sink or swim. And they swam very well. The Lummi Indians are one of the many Northwest tribes whose culture has been close to the sea. They're expert fishermen, but now they're growing fish. Here you see seed oysters under a microscope. They have the first oyster hatchery in the Northwest. They prepare seed for sale, as you see here, or they grow it themselves in a tray, a very much more modern way of doing it. This is the Lummi Indian oyster hatchery. It's built on the Indian longhouse design using Indian culture, modifications to let the light in through plastic surfaces. The assistant director of this is a Lummi who started out as a carpenter and is now one of the experts in this field. From the air you see the beginning of the dike, which the Lummis built themselves. They ended up purchasing about 10 trucks in the process. Built 3 miles of dike between the tides, a very difficult and risky thing to do. But as a result of this enterprise, they branched out into other things such as home building. They built 40 houses on their own in 6 months. First class, and they're now going to build 60 more, eventually 400 homes. Here is the sea pond, 700 acres, a 3-mile dike, and you can see the plankton bloom inside, which is food for the oysters. Which gives you some idea. There is no other sea farm of this kind, and there are about 75 jobs. 90% of the workforce is Indian, and eventually it will be 100% Indian.
Yeah, not all. Gee, that's impressive. Not all Indians are so lucky to come up with a solution to their problems like this. And Mervyn Wright is a Paiute from Nevada, I guess you say. And they've got a tremendous problem with their water rights. What is it?
So if you want to know my aspect of Indian water rights, is that what this means when the Supreme Court denied to take the case was that they will put this thing back into the to Nevada, who is the ultimate enemy of Indian tribes, and yet we have to contend with the courts to feel that we, you know.
What about your senators?
I think we have good, strong representation as far as senators. Our own, and of course, if you want to go in depth, I think that Senator Kennedy and Tunney went to bat for the tribes, also for others too.
What we will move to, we'll show you how the descending order of how these problems spiral downward. We'll have a message. We'll be right back. I had several distressed phone calls a few months back saying you must come out to Lame Deer. The Cheyenne Reservation is threatened with disaster. I couldn't go then, and I don't know what happened there. But anyway, Dennis Limberhand is here right now. Is it true that something like, you're from Lame Deer, you're from the Cheyenne Reservation. Is it true that something like half the reservation has been given away?
Well, not exactly given away. About 55% of our reservation is under coal company control.
Coal company?
Right.
Well, do the Indians have the right to that land, or don't they?
Well, we think we do. That prompted our tribal council into taking action against the United States government. We asked the Bureau of Indian Affairs to declare all permits and leases null and void.
Is that treaty land?
I believe it is, yeah. Congressional order reservation.
Has strip mining started there?
Well, not on the reservation, but adjoining the reservation, there's a lot of strip mining.
Yeah.
On north, south, and east and west of us, there's strip mining.
Are some of the people for that?
Well, knowing my Indian people, I'd say no. They live off the land. They respect the land for what it is.
As I understand, the problem it always is that they need money immediately, and it's tempting for them to say, well, let's get some money quick from the coal companies, and because they can't afford to wait a year or two for a better deal. And often, correct me if I'm wrong, they're shafted by the fact that they accept money now because they're worried about paying next month's rent. And the power companies have been more than willing to take advantage of this.
Saying is that, what Dennis is saying is that it's people like you that can give me $100 to have a dinner with you, and maybe we'll go out and have a good time. And
it's tempting to want that.
What the essence is really that this land is there. It's reservation land. This is all we have left.
And it goes back to the old quote.
I don't like it's been raped. It's been raped, and getting back to water rights. I think everything's been taken away from the tribe. We're trying to maintain what we have left.
Excuse me, I got to get this film clip in right now. Would you tell us, Dennis, what we're going to see in this film clip? It's about strip mining, and well, why don't we just roll it, and then we can go back to where we were.
This is the use of a total energy plant in the Yuma Reservation, showing that a power plant can give off waste heat, which can be used to grow plants year-round. And it shows an alternative to strip mining. That is, the tribe could grow $170 worth of vegetables for what would they get 17 cents worth for their coal. This shows strip mining, the land being blown up and carried away in fantastic proportions. They have 1 billion tons of coal on the reservation, and this could all be removed in a 35-year period, leaving total destruction for 200,000 acres. That's the issue this week for the tribe that is discussing this in the tribal council. And the question is whether to go that, leaving power plants surrounding them, which put hundreds of tons of material into the day, which I think would create skies with 20 times the pollution that Los Angeles now has. These are factual things, and even the Bureau of Reclamation records themselves.
Yeah. Was that Black Mesa, some of that film we just saw?
Yes, Black Mesa in Arizona.
Arizona. That's been called one of the great ecological disasters of all time. And that the Four Corners plant down there puts out more pollution than L.A. and New York combined.
By a factor of 20.
That is contained on Navajo Reservation and Hopi Reservation.
I missed the first part of that. Say that again?
That Black Mesa is located on the Navajo Reservation and Hopi Reservation.
Yeah, and unbelievable the amount of pollution that it does. I know those companies have a concern for their public image. I've also had menacing and threatening letters from Peabody Coal and others, and I never answered one. One of them was carbon to all the people who could have me fired, which I thought was interesting. If the guy who wrote it is watching, I answered you, but I only sent out carbons. I didn't send you a copy. To everyone influential in America, Kate Smith, John Wayne, everybody. We have a brief message. We'll be right back. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, I've been using this little book as far as promoting the fisheries at Pyramid Lake, as far as development is concerned. Yeah. It's very interesting. It has a history of the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe, and as far as the Indian Wars, and also the
Desert Lake.
Our efforts into developing that kind of thing.
There's so much to read and master on this.
Right, I like to give.
I just wonder. I just want to know who the Indians' friends are in Washington, since that's where things get done. Who wants to grab that? Senator Jackson has been despised by Indian leaders at times, Senator Scoop Jackson, and lately I hear that his reputation has improved. What takes place in a case
like
like
that? Well, I'd like to say something. I might be in opposition to the Indians because some of the Indians are now, because Jackson has turned around and been more or less cooperative with the Indians. He has been the enemy of Indians for over a long, long period of time, and since he wishes to polish his image, he's using the Indians as a polishing rag and doing favors for Indians and being attentive to Indian affairs. But when the Blue Lake was given back to the Pueblo Indians, his comment was that it set a very bad precedent, and he was very adamant about that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sam. It puts him in a tough
I'm sort of biased because Jackson, Magnus, and Meade is what I feel is a very powerful force in Washington, D.C. And because they're my congressional people, that I feel that he had to walk the middle of the line like any other politician. I do not want to comment any further, but I do want to say this, that if there is a friend in Washington, it's in the form of legislation that is now pending for the last 3 years. And I don't know whether Congress knows it or if it's there or who has informed them that this legislation is there that would help relieve the problems that we use Bureau of Indian Affairs as a scapegoat.
Would it help if people watching who write in after we talk like this and say, what can we do to help?
That would...
If they got in touch with their congressman and said, what Indian legislation are you concerned with, and what's your opinion of it?
Well, there's financing bills, there's Indian Trust Authority bill, there's a education bill, amendment to the Johnson-O'Malley Act pertaining to Indian education. The whole package is there, and what we don't need is hearings. We need action from the American citizens that could write their senators and congressmen and get this legislation passed and get us off the receiving end of this richest country in the world. We are ready and willing and able. to go ahead and start economic development on reservations and utilizing our enormous resources. It takes the almighty dollar to do this, and this legislation, it's in Congress right now, pending, would be the means to that end.
And the Lummies have certainly shown they can do it.
Well, I'd like to add to that. First of all, I think we all mean well wanting to find the bad guys and the good guys, you know, in Washington and elsewhere. Yeah. I would like to say Senator Jackson, Senator Magnuson, Congressman Lloyd Meads, and others in our district have stuck their neck out a mile against heavy opposition to support the Lummi Project and many other Indian projects. They've been very courageous about this. Many other senators have done this. The Vice President's office, through Bob Robertson and the NCIO, have done this. We have a long, in other words, you like to think that the Republicans, the Democrats, or there's far more variation within a party supporting Indians than there is between parties. And Indians don't like to pick favorites and generalities. They like to zero in on the specifics. And in these cases, these senators and congressmen have a long record. The agencies have very good records, many of them very bad records in some cases. The important thing, though, is the great inertia in between. Those who just don't care, they don't even show up to vote in Congress on these bills. And they've been there for 3 or 4 years that he's mentioning. For example, to create more economic development reservations, the money should go directly from the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, to the tribes and let them make the mistakes like any other agency or any other group does, and enable them to hire and fire their own personnel so that they can move ahead at their own rate. And there is now, they're asking for authorization for block grants to let the BIA do this for the first time.
They say congressmen forget about Indians when they get to Washington because they don't have that many Indian constituents. But if their white constituents began to write to them and say, I'm not an Indian, but I'm interested in how you're going to vote on this.
Yeah, a few thousand postcards would
all the difference. Yeah, they certainly listen to that mail. Are you sorry you came on a show like this?
No, I wish I'd been more helpful and funnier and more articulate and amusing way.
Hey, I know. I'm gonna give you a chance I seldom give people. Will you come back tomorrow night? You can think about this. I have a message.
Sure, Dick.
Message, and we'll be right back. Lummi Pacific Ocean trout. Lummi Indian Enterprise, Marietta, Washington. Mr. Brando is eating it and looks great.
Yeah.
Gee, you're really in business. I'm delighted to see that. Give me a chunk of that. That's wonderful.
Isn't that good?
I'm going to stop doing a show and start eating more. Well, thank you for being here. It's a rare treat for us and a great pleasure. Thank you all, gentlemen.